welcome back to another episode of the Microshift Project Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Nicholas Valinchak. That's Nicky V if you're nasty. And in honor and remembrance of my friend, Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney, I have one question to ask you before we get started today. Is Nick Valinchak looking good today or what? Okay. For those of you who don't get the reference, be ashamed. Do your research, do your homework about the late and great Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney, or refer back to our previous podcast to get a little bit of an understanding about who he was and the impact that his life and legacy had on me personally. Today we're going to talk about the final step, the fifth microshift. And this comes probably not too long, maybe 6 months, maybe 2 years at most, after going through the transformation and understanding more about how I need to tell my story, how I need to sing my song to make sure that I could help people to not have to go through the same trials and tribulations, most of which I put myself through. So at this point, I'm trying to first and foremost do math in my head, because I'm thinking this is around the time I'm probably coming towards the end of my bachelor's degree, where I'm getting ready to start to set sail in the world, was my belief. But things hadn't been going very smoothly at this point whatsoever. From a personal perspective, my wife at the time had just graduated from crack to heroin, so that was fun. It presented a new level of challenges, but interestingly enough, I never, ever in the process thought about going back to doing drugs. I had pretty much just told myself that I'm fine with drinking wine and having beers now and then, and I'm okay with, smoking weed when I feel anxious. But other than that, we're done here. There's nothing to go back to. I have nothing. That has nothing left to give to me. That life has nothing for me. That always put me in a very depressed situation. Work was going terribly. I had started really to get to the point where I hated going to work at the rescue mission. I loved the clients. I loved trying to make a change in their lives, but I was consistently passed over for opportunities. I was told by, the administrators there that a lot of the reason was because they were just waiting for the other shoe to drop for me, which, holla, not gonna happen. Maybe I hold a little bit of spite. That's fine. I might open up a spite shelter one day. We'll see. But I don't play around with that stuff. When you're going to start telling me that I can't, that the shoe is going to drop and I'm going to go back, it's a possibility, and we can't put trust in me after watching every other fool practically who came through there go and do the exact same thing. And I'm still standing here far ahead of where anyone ever expected me to be 10 and 20 years later, tells you all you need to know about how people assess other people and why I'm always willing to try to give people other chances, because I know that there were points and times where I needed other chances and people limited what they thought I would do. I could go on a real tangent about this, but I'm going to kind of cool off on it and not really do that today, because that's not the point. But I think you can start to get the idea here and understand where I'm coming from, where my home life's a wreck, my work, I can't get ahead. No matter how much I put in, it just feels like it's constantly not good enough. Then it's also extending into not necessarily my schooling, but here I am interviewing for, internships, and I'm amongst the tops in my class. I'm very eloquent, and I know how to talk to people. When you're a drug addict, you have to be a con man. And so you start to understand how to assess the situations you're in to say the things you need to say to get your desired achievement. But I'm finding that I'm constantly getting passed over and then hearing from people who are in the situations because I'm a tad too old. They would prefer to work with some people who are like super fresh, and I'm approaching 28, maybe even 30 at this point. And when they can get kids that are 20 years from an investment perspective, they feel like they could get more time out of those people. And so I was just trying my hardest, but really felt like I was moving backwards to some extent, like, because you start to develop this mentality of like, what am I really doing here? Like, my efforts lead to nothing, no matter how hard I try. And I just want there to be more to life than constantly having to struggle. And I had and have many different thoughts about things as they exist in terms of why that happened. Part of me thinks that there's an element of, testing and only putting as much on you as you can handle, or karma. Hey, you did all of this to all these people. You can't expect that life is just going to just be, I'm better now and I'm all fixed and changed and, it's all rainbows and bunny rabbits. So it was just not in a good place, just really not in a good place. And I think I had started to feel like giving up. I didn't know what giving up felt like, right? Because again, I'm a guy who's very pragmatic, and I try to, when you try to figure out what does it look like if I quit, it's like, well, if I quit, it's not going back to drugs. It's just being willing to say that you're never able to get above the lot you're in life. And I feel like once you feel like that, your life is effectively over, whether you're alive or not. Around this time, I had been working in the student. I worked for the Office of Business Administration. I actually forget what my position. It was in admissions, I think. Yeah. And I had to start working a second job, not for money necessarily. Like, I needed the money, but most of it was because I didn't want to be around my wife as much as possible. So if I was able to go to school and work at school and then work full-time at the mission, I pretty well, maintain an ability to never have to be home to see her, which was truly great. But at the same time, like, now the school side of things was starting to feel like it was turning on me. And I remember being in a really bad mood one day, and the people working in the office with me, one of which is now my wife, was like, oh, Tony Lariccia is actually coming to his office today. And now Tony Lariccia, in the Youngstown area especially, is a name that everybody knows. His philanthropy has done more than just about any other person that this area has ever seen. And even though he is very, very short in stature, he was huge in heart. And I remember as I became an ambassador for the Williamson College of Business Administration to try to put something on my resume to elevate me in the eyes of these people I was interviewing with, I had the chance to try to meet him, and I had started having a conversation with him, and like 4 people just like jammed right in to talk to him, I'm sure to try to ask him for money, because that's just how people are. And I didn't get, I left that night feeling like, man, I was really excited to be able to meet this guy because he's done a lot for the community, and I just want to be able to pick a guy like that's brain, and it just didn't happen. When I heard he was coming to his office and he was walking down the hallway, like, yeah, I didn't care. That meant nothing to me. Like, I tried to meet him, and I had no bad feelings toward him. I didn't expect him to come running back to me like it was some rom-com or anything like that, right? I didn't think that anything like that was going to happen. And
and he went into his office, whatever. I just worked. And then 30 minutes later, he kind of comes into our office and starts walking around and talking to people. And he stops at me and he's like, "Where do I know you?" And I was like, "Oh, there was an event, 6 months ago or whatever, that I was an ambassador at, and I was trying to talk to you during the event." He's like, "Yeah, and some people came up and interrupted us." And I was like, "Yeah, wow, I kind of impressed that you remember that." He's like, "Yeah, you got to understand, people come to talk to me all the time. And it's not always for money, but it's always for something that they have weighing on their mind." And I was like, "I get it. I was mad at the time. It's kind of been, long enough that I'm not really holding any kind of negative feelings towards the people who did it. It's just one of those whatever it happens type things." And so he's like, "How old are you?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm 28, whatever, how old I was at the time." He's like, "Oh, you're a little bit older for, being in school." And I was like, "Well, to be honest with you, I did a bunch of stupid things in my late teens and early 20s that put me in a position where I had a big hole to dig out of." And so he was like, "Oh, well, why don't you, what do you mean?" So I went into not all the grisly details, but I talked to him about a lot of the things that I did. And he just stood there just completely aghast, just like, wow. And he's like, "Can you come into my office with me?" And I was like, "Okay." And so I went in there and he was like, "I'm honestly amazed about what you just told me about how you were so young and you came from an upper middle class area and still found yourself at a homeless shelter with no one who was willing to raise their hand and claim you, and people were kind of turning their backs on you." And I was like, "Well, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily they were turning their backs on me. I look at it as I was forcefully picking them up and turning their backs. But yeah, same principle. No one wanted to see me, whatever." And he's like, that's awesome." And he's like, "Every time I'm here, I'm going to come and pull you and you're going to do little things for me and we're going to talk." And I was just like, okay, so I guess I have like an unofficial Tony Lariccia internship here. And true to his word, he would come into school and he would literally walk into the office and say like, "Hey, Nicky's coming with me." And as long as someone else was there working, what are you going to say to a guy who has an office in the building, whose name is all over the campus and things like that? How are you going to tell this man no, that he can't take somebody for a few hours a week? And oftentimes we would just sit there for hours and he would tell me stories, and he would tell me stories that I am sure that he has not told many other people in his life. And again, I started to feel a little better about myself because I'm like, man, this incredibly wealthy, well-known philanthropist in this area is telling me blackmailable things. Like, either he's not sharp, and that cannot be the case. It cannot be the case. Or he likes me and he sees something in me. And so the relationship grew from there, and he would start calling me in the mornings and just say, "Hey, I know that you're not working today, but I just wanted to tell you I was thinking about you. Have a good day." It was like he became almost like a parent. It was like a missing role in my life of a supportive person, whether it be a parent or a mentor. Let's call it a mentor. I think that's more appropriate. It even came to the point where I would come in and he'd be like, "Hey, go into my Merrill Lynch profile and execute these, do these things and move this money around." And this man has many, many dollars in there with commas that I have never seen in places before. And he's allowing someone like me who, if I was truly a bad person still, I could have concocted a way to possibly try to take some of the money, but it was never something. He never looked over his shoulder. He would leave the office and go to the bathroom and just leave me there with his fortune, with whatever it was. And I had no intention of doing anything nefarious, but it was always still the mindset and mentality to me that like, he trusts me enough that he doesn't feel like he has to be present while I'm doing these things. So again, I'm starting to think and I'm starting to feel within myself like this guy might see something in me that I'm not really seeing, or that for sure other people aren't seeing, because I'm not getting the opportunities that I really feel like I should. And even in that, I start thinking to myself about things like, can I really confidently say that I deserve these things? Right? I was trying to check myself and take a mental evaluation of, are you trying to feel like you deserve things, and because of the way you see things, somebody not seeing them the same way is a prejudice of some sort against you, you know, and I really had to challenge myself to think through that and actually put myself in other people's shoes. And admittedly, I started to feel a little better about that and say, like, hey, everybody has to make the decision that they think is best for their business. And it's not always as cut and dry as this is the person that's most suited for this specific role right now. Oftentimes it can be things like, hey, we're hiring for a role now, and this person is close to the other person, but we see that 10 years of extra experience they could bring to the table as such or the 10 years extra that they could stay with the company, that is such an extra added benefit that it kind of outweighs. So it really challenged me to have a different perspective and not just be in the mentality of, woe is me. So I had started feeling better, and one of those days he came back into the office and, he's like, let's walk. And I was like, hey, that's fine. This is pretty fun. And I really liked fucking with the girls that I worked with in the office, because they would constantly tell me, oh, you don't do anything around here. You just sit around. And so because they would constantly jaw at me like that, the ability to walk around with Tony Lariccia, who no one was going to fuck with, and do whatever I wanted to do, was pretty much me being able to snub my nose at them and say, like, this is what talking shit gets you. This is the payback on all that. Because I did stuff around there. I just don't think, like, they didn't ask me as much. And so if someone asks you to do something, if someone asks one person to do something and not the other, and it happens in of a greater frequency than they ask the other person, like, that's not my fault. That's the other person prefers to have this person do it for them, or they don't want to ask the other. I don't know. I can't get inside someone's head. I certainly wasn't telling people things like, no, I'm not doing that. I was never standoffish at work. I would stand up for myself for damn sure. I definitely had a reputation that you weren't going to talk to me a certain way. You weren't getting, you weren't able to just run off however you wanted to. But those situations were so few and far between. It was never with people that I was working directly with there. It was mostly with kids coming in who thought that they were privileged. It was with other people that worked there who thought they were privileged, professors who thought they were privileged. It became pretty well known that you watch what you say around me. That's it. Bottom line. And I think everybody should have a two-way relationship with what I'm saying. You should act like that, and you should command respect, but it should be through your actions, that you're doing it for other people, that you're holding doors, that you're, talking to people, wishing them good morning, trying to bring good energy and good vibes into their day. And if you get checked in a certain way that catches you sideways and it's not right, you need to be able and willing to stand up for yourself. Being a good person and being a nice person doesn't mean you lay down as a doormat and let everybody walk all over you like they want to. That's just not how those things, I do not view those two things as being the same thing. They're different. That's being weak. You have to be strong. You have to be willing to stand up for yourself, because there's a lack of people out there that will. So anyway, back to the original point, Tony and I are walking through, and Tony always had a point of trying to stop and talk to people. And he was always respectful and would try to include me in it, try to make sure, I think some of it was like showing me how to network. I think some of it was showing me how to have conversation with people, especially when it might seem hard to know what to have conversation about. And I can admit that was a real weakness for me when I was at that point in my life. I hadn't been through enough positive stuff, I guess, really to understand how to talk to a human being without being a factory of sadness. And I remember heading back to the office, we were just walking by a professor, and Tony Lariccia grabs him and says, "Hey, did you know Nicky used to be a drug addict?" And I was just like, yeah, I was. And they were like, "Oh, well, congratulations for not being a drug addict anymore." You could tell there was a general like, "Oh, I'm astonished that he said this," but the other person is also flummoxed at the fact that this person stopped them to tell them something so personal about someone else. And, Tony was getting on in years. And so initially I kind of just took it as like, well, maybe it was just like a mental slip and nothing that I like, nothing, certainly nothing nefarious, but like, something he just didn't think through and just kind of came out. And then we started doing the walks pretty routinely. We'd take the elevator, go up to the dean's office. We'd be walking through. "Hey, did you know Nicky used to be a drug addict?" "Okay, yeah, I'm the monkey that he's dancing around right now." So, and I started to feel a certain way about it. And then at one point we were walking by a student, and he stops the student, and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Lariccia, how you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm great. Have you met Nicky? He used to be a drug addict." And I was just like, okay, I have classes with this person. When you tell someone you used to be a drug addict, I mean, I don't think that people are assume you to be Gandhi or Mother Teresa or anything like that. So I decide like this is clearly not an incidental thing. This is a thing that Tony's doing on purpose, and it's starting to make me feel uncomfortable. And so if he's taught me anything, it has been that, I need to speak up for myself. So I get back into his office and I tell him, I was like, "Hey, Tony, I respect everything that you do for me. I love the fact that I'm able to come in here and help you with things. I love that you have taken a liking to me and allow me to do things for you. That really does a lot to build up my confidence, to make me feel good about myself. But I gotta be honest, I feel really uncomfortable when we're walking through the halls and you like feel like you have to stop and tell someone that Nicky was a drug addict." And I was like, "Why? What is your basis behind doing that?" And he stopped dead set, sat on the edge of his desk, and he looked at me and he said, "Because, Nicky, most of these people will never do what you've been doing and will never go through what you've gone through, and you should be proud of that." Oh, yeah, okay. And I think that was the final, oh my God. I just went through this thing over here with coping with not being able or willing out of fear to tell somebody what I had been through, something that maybe, and look, I'm not going to ever sit here and believe that what I said was going to directly cause him to be like, "Yeah, you know what? Like, life is happy. I'm all better now." But you never know. Like, and you don't take those chances. You take every opportunity you get to share your story. And he taught me that, yeah, I was coping and understanding that I had to do that with people over here, but I also just need to be willing to accept that that's what I was, and that it's not a weakness, that it is my strength, and that I should feel comfortable regardless if it's someone I'm very close with or someone who he just decides to yank by the shirt collar and have a conversation with, that it's okay to talk about that. And I think that day that was the final thing that really changed me into the monster or person that I am today, depending on how you look at it. It really revitalized my view on life. And I can't tell you how many times I have been on sales calls with people I will be talking to them for 2 or 3 minutes, and it's just like, yeah, I was a homeless drug addict by the time I was 21, and all of a sudden we're having conversation about it, deeper conversation than my usual go-to. Hey, do you like sports? No, okay, bye. It was nice talking to you. It helps you build real relationships because people are like, that person was so willing to just be so vulnerable with me right there. I feel comfortable talking to them about whatever because they were just able to lay all of their bullshit on the line and not be afraid of it. And so those 5 things, right, all encompassed what I became and where I'm headed and what my mission is right now. It was hope from strangers when I didn't deserve it. It was dignity given to me from a police officer when it should have been cuffs and a long, lengthy prison term. It was the person at the homeless shelter being a little bit gruff with me, but allowing me to hold a mirror to myself to see the monster that I had become and notice that I had my hand up my shirt and I was the puppet master as well. It was going through all of those changes and having too much fear to talk to someone who was in a similar position, maybe not the exact same situation, but a similar position that I was in. And I was lucky enough to have people who were willing to tell me the stories to let me know that it's not too late and that I can do this. And it was a man who, by all appearances, had no reason or no business taking a lanky 30-year-old kid, yes, a kid at 30 years old, under his wing and letting him know that the thing that he thought was his greatest weakness was actually going to be his greatest strength. And I am so happy for everything that I've gone through. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have with people where they say, man, don't you wish that you could have, you have such a good outlook and, you're so smart. And don't you wish you could have just not gone through the drugs and gone to school? And man, you probably could have been running a blup company right now. And I always tell people, I could have also gotten in a car completely sober and been in the wrong place at the wrong time and got T-boned by a drunk driver sending me to my death. I don't know that, and you don't know that. But what I do know is everything that I went through created the path that I walk today. And it was a hard path to walk at times, but it made me the person I was, and I wouldn't give anything up. All of the bad times or all of the good times, I would give none of it up to maybe have an opportunity of a better life. I love everything that I've had to go through. I love it because it made me the person I am today, and I'm happy with the person that I am today. I'm happy that I have an opportunity to take stages like I did at MIT to talk to people who can really benefit from hearing my message. I'm happy that I had 10 years to sit down with people who were in similar positions that I was in and tell them, listen, if I can do it, you can do it, and here's how. And watch some of those people be able to continue to walk upright. I'm happy about all of those things. I would not trade anything that I've had to go through for better or worse. None of it. And I'm excited for what this is going to become because I feel like over the last probably, 3 hours of doing these podcasts, I think you have a good understanding of who I am and where I came from. Now I'm excited to take the journey forward and do some of these episodes where I talk about very real experiences that I've been through, but also to bring in a myriad of people. I'm going to bring in names from all around the country who have done big things. Some of them you're going to know, some of them you will have never heard of before, but the bottom line is they have a story that's impactful, a cause that means a lot to them and to the world, and a message for somebody to hear. But I'm also going to bring in people that I just know are average people trying to do their best to get through the situation they're in to make the best out of this life that we're given. I'm going to bring in some of the people that I was out there running the streets with because we can have a good conversation. And I think it's always fun to be able to look at that and be like, oh, look at that guy and how great he's been able to build 6 companies and whoop, 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 and do all this stuff. But sometimes you need to hear it from the guy who's pouring concrete or building windows or hitting the streets as a salesperson to talk through how they've just been able to maintain, and it's more relatable. So I'm excited for this journey, and I hope you are too. And really, genuinely, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this. If you feel so inclined, I would love for you to be able to subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Share this with somebody if you feel like what you've heard today could actually be a benefit to them. You can find me on all social medias. My personal accounts are all Nick from CWE. Business accounts are at the Microshift. You can visit us at themicroshift.com. And man, I'm excited. Thank you for being a part of this, and we will talk again next week.